burnout for me meant that my thyroid almost stopped working. So my body pushed the big red button and it said to me, I've told you, we've had conversations and you've ignored me. So I'm going to put the brakes on and we're going to stop.
Welcome to The Sound Leadership, the podcast for the silent superheroes of L&D, HR and leadership. The show that helps you build awareness and inspire personal responsibility through action. Today we're joined by Georgina Shute, who is a founder of KindTwo, who are on a mission to demystify and help unlock the power of neurodiversity. They do two things: empower you to embrace ADHD and empower organisations to help you thrive. Gina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. Thank you for giving up your time to travel here and come and see us in our wonderful studios in Winnersh. Should we go back a couple of years? So we rewind 2 years and you walked out on a solid job, didn't you?
I did. Do you know what? I think it might actually be longer than 2 years ago now. I think it might be 3.5, maybe even 4. I think with lockdown, all time just kind of became one blob, one thing. So I think it's actually, I don't know, an amount of time ago, I walked out on what people would deem a really good job. So I was leading teams. I've been working in consultancy for years, was doing, really, really good stuff. And it got to the point where I was working myself into the ground because I didn't know how to work with my own brain. And I think working for, 15 years or so now, which again feels like a really big blob of time, to get to the point where burnout for me meant that my thyroid almost stopped working. So the dramatic part of that, I guess, is by getting so poorly, I had to take 7 months off work. And it was a very stressful job and it was really challenging. So from that kind of lit a fire up under me, I think, to go on this mission to understand how I can make work for me, because I don't want to ever be in that space again. And from that came KindTwo.
And how did it feel at that point that finally you were putting yourself first? Was it a actual choice of I'm going to put myself first, or was it actually I can't carry on at the point because of what's happening to my body?
So it was the second one. So I'd love to say it was the first one, and I really knew what was going on, and I really was able to understand myself enough to say, actually, this isn't working anymore. And I think that's a situation that a lot of people find themselves in, that our bodies are so smart and they tell us time and time again, probably, come on, can we stop, can we slow down a little bit? And we say, it's probably fine, I'm going to work more hours, I'm just going to get it done. And my body pushed the big red button and it said to me, I've told you, we've had conversations and you've ignored me, so I'm going to put the brakes on and we're going to stop.
After that bit of time, that's those 7 months, what was your mindset?
The 7 months was really building myself up from ground zero again, which, I don't know, as a woman in her 30s was quite a strange thing to think about doing. You know, you go from the rat race, working goodness knows how many hours, doing the whole London thing, to I can't really get out of bed. So there was that chapter. And then as I started to feel better, my mindset was more around how can I make something work for me? I don't necessarily know exactly what that is, but the way I have been working up until this point hasn't worked for me. I've seen things working for other people and I've either copied it or gone, oh, I think that looks all right, I'll give that a go. And now it's at a point where I know how to work with my brain, and whether that's taking breaks, whether that's saying, I don't know, I want to go on a podcast, whatever those things are, like trying to do the things that actually spark joy in my life. And I do think it is really possible to come through a really challenging situation and go, what I really would like is a calm life and one that I can make work for me.
I like what you said there about finding joy in life. Sometimes we have to go through those not so good moments. Would you, looking back now, would you change that period of time? Would you delete it and not have it? Or do you think there's been a big benefit from going through those, that tough time?
I think it's really important that we learn from the things that happen in our lives. And I think we're going through this AI world now where it's so easy to learn really big things really quickly, and those experiences don't always happen. So I personally think that the experiences that we go through do give us kind of like that ability to go, oh, okay, I probably won't do that again. But what I'll take from that experience is I can do things for myself, and that the world isn't really set up for anybody except for the person that decided to build it in the first place. Therefore, we all have the opportunity to figure out what actually works for us.
You looked and you took responsibility actually of how can this start to work for me? Because so many people, and at times I've been guilty of this, that I blame everything around me. I will blame the society, the organisation I was working for, the people that I was with. And just by flipping that, you went, no, what can I do? That meant you were a bit more in control compared to before where we blame others. And we'll come on to self-awareness later. But how did you start creating that? How did you give yourself the time to do it? And how did you give yourself the permission to do it and not just jump straight back into the world that caused all that stress before?
I think what I really like about what you said there is about taking ownership and responsibility of your next steps. And that doesn't necessarily mean the really big stuff. It means I'm going to take control of, I don't know, I want to make a coffee at 3:00 in the afternoon. I'm going to do that. And these things start with small acts of responsibility for ourselves. And I think we're going to come on to it in a little bit, but the self-understanding and the self-compassion of, I don't know, it's nice to do good stuff for ourselves and being able to take that responsibility. There's the diagram of what's within our control, what's within our sphere of influence, and also what we can't control. And I think as humans, we're wired to look to the future to find that next lion that could be coming to, take the food from our plates or whatever. The things that we really can control are right in front of us. The only moment we have right now is where we are. I can't control what's happening outside this door. I can't control what time. I think I know what time I'm going to get the train, but that's an hour or so away. The only time I have right now is in this space. And I think sometimes when we reflect on what we can control, I think it becomes, I don't know, it's not the easiest thing in the world to take control of your own life. I'm not saying that at all, but I do believe it's absolutely possible. And it starts with a bit of permission, I think, to go, I've got this. I really do. I've got this. I'm giving myself that permission slip.
It's so powerful that it's control the controllables, isn't it? Control what is within your sphere, what that you can look after. And when you start doing that, we take away a lot of the overwhelm. You work with overwhelmed women and men?
Yeah, so I mainly work with women. I do work with a few men. I think that the style of coaching that I've put together, I think it stems from taking control of your own world and understanding that we can do this for ourselves. Like you were saying, overwhelm, I think we're trying to control all of the things all at the same time. I don't know, you're riding on a tightrope on a unicycle and you're trying to spin plates at the same time, and then something else drops and then you've got your foot spinning plates, That's a lot of stuff. And when one thing goes, maybe let's take away some of the plates. Maybe let's not get on the tightrope today. Maybe we just think, what have I got to do right now? Sit in this space and have a lovely conversation.
Yeah, I'm with you on that in terms of control those moments, be present, be in the moment, and it's easy to talk about. It's much harder to do. And I'll go back to one of your points about it's creating those little habits that allow us to do that. What's my next step or my first next step? Mm-hmm. What's the next thing that I can do that is within my control? Yeah. So saying yes to coming on a podcast and then understanding what we're talking about and then a little bit of preparation and then get here early. And it's all of those little things that then allow this greater task to have a good output at the end of it. And when we worry about the whole project and the end point, that does become very overwhelming. When we break it down to the small tasks that we got to do, that makes a big difference. I'm just going to go back to, you mentioned, you used the example of making a coffee at 3:00 in the afternoon. I had a conversation with one of my team this week, in fact, about working at home and what that is like now, because we work in a hybrid world. Some people are in the office regularly, some not at all, and anything in between. And what he said to me was around, actually, sometimes when we're at home working, we feel like we can't leave our desk. And I said, you absolutely can, by the way, because that is definitely not the environment we're creating. You absolutely can. You shouldn't feel guilty about going and having your lunch break or going to make a cup of tea or a coffee. And I did this the other week. I was sat there in front of the screen and about 15 minutes passed. And I was like, I've done nothing at all. I just had a complete mental block to trying to do something creative and just got really stuck with it. I was like, do you know what? I'm going to take some of my own advice. I went away and I went and had half an hour. I went for a walk, got tea or a coffee or whatever it was, had a drink, sat down, read a book, whatever it is that you want to do. But I took myself out of that for half an hour, came back, and the next 2 hours of the day got loads done. Yeah, so let's not be afraid to take ourselves out of those, out of those times when we're struggling.
I think there's also a really interesting point there about leadership and showing those values. So if you've got staff members or team members that find it really challenging to take a break, it's showing that it's okay, because, we've worked in the working world for a really long time. And I think, I had my first job when I was 14, I've been working for a little while now. And if a leader shows that it's okay, I don't know, you said to your team, for example, I need a break. I'm going to take 5 minutes. I'm going to take half an hour. I'm not going to be online for the next half an hour, but I will be back. And I think creating that sense of psychological safety, it's not I'm going away, you don't know when I'm coming back. It's I'm going for a coffee. I'll be back in, half an hour's time. It's okay. We've got this. I think sometimes we deserve to parent ourselves of how we look after children or how we speak to animals. We don't shout at them, or maybe sometimes we do when they're being very naughty, but the conversation around, okay, you fell over, like I said, we've got this, don't worry. And we can give that gift to ourselves.
We're harshest on ourselves.
For sure.
And we and you do, and you role model, and you put other people first, and you go and have your lunch break. Absolutely, go and have an hour. Do you know what? I don't care if you have an hour and a half or 2 hours. If you come back more productive in the afternoon and that's the best space for you, do that. It doesn't make a difference. But then we don't do it ourselves. And often we talk about the actions that come out of our awareness, and we can talk a good game, but if we don't physically role model that through our actions, others won't ever follow us in that vein. And
I think it goes back to the psychological safety point. If someone, it's all talk and no action, whatever the right phrase is that we want to use, if people don't see that it's okay to do it, it becomes that scary thing where they think, maybe I can't do that. Why they're saying that, but they're not doing it. So maybe it isn't okay. And that might also be subconscious as well. They might not be thinking about it. Then human beings are naturally together beings. We want to spend time with each other, maybe not all the time, but if you're doing something as a leader, I think it's really important if you're saying something that you're showing up for yourself and you're doing it as well.
I think it's interesting because science has proved how you treat yourself is probably how you treat others. So a lot of people say, I'm very kind to other people, but I'm not kind to myself. The chances are, if you're not kind to yourself, you're probably not as kind to other people as you actually think you are, because you're creating those habits when you're doing it with yourself. So if you want to appreciate people more or be kind to people more, we've probably got to practice on ourselves first, because that creates and starts forming the habits. That means our minds look for those different things and we'll start speaking to others differently. And I think that's really interesting.
And I think also a lot of this stuff stems from like all of this stuff is imprinted in our DNA. So us sitting here now, imagine how many people had to be born for us to exist in this space right now. So we have nature and nurture, and I think we're all at a stage in our lives now where we can make our own decisions and our own changes, acknowledging these things are part of me and I can choose, because I have the agency within myself, I can choose to make a difference. I can choose to make a change.
We have a need to belong as human beings. Yeah. We have a need to be loved, and we like to be a part of a tribe. Yeah. So whether that's a sports club, a church, a community, a work group, a book club, whatever that might be, we like that sense of belonging, to feel like we're valued in it. And that's a really important message with your teams as well. If you're supporting a team, allow people to feel valued in there, but it's got to be genuine, it's got to be authentic.
And I think also with the internet and allowing so many people to connect more and more and more, I think sometimes we can lose that, because the ability is there. And I think it's about active creation of spaces to visit, whether it's physically together or smaller groups. So all of the things you mentioned there have the ability to be a small group, but it's part of a wider thing. But human beings, I think, do best when they're acting with a small group of people.
Doesn't it say anything above a certain number and then you start to lose control, and then that's when that overwhelming, that control starts to go, and that's when people start to struggle with those burnouts.
But there's research that suggests that we really know about 150 people. We have acquaintances that we can remember up to about 250, and above that we don't remember people. So if we're at our capacity of, I know 250 people, the 251st, I may not recall that encounter until they become more in our sphere and more within our tribe. That, if they joined my sports club, for example, or they joined the business, then they bump themselves into that top sort of 150. But yeah, we only have a certain amount of capacity for people that we can cope with at any one time. And
I think also that it's okay. I think with the idea of having millions of followers and that kind of stuff, which is great, lovely, it's okay to just want to hang out with a few people.
Yeah, agreed. There's trusted people around you. Yeah, absolutely. Can we talk about ADHD?
We can.
And how did that show up for you, and what did that change for you?
So when I was a kid, I'm not going to tell you my whole life story, I promise. But when I was at school, I must be about 14 or 15, I was told by a teacher I would equate to nothing. And I always thought that was a bit of an oxymoron, because I was also a member of NAGTI, which is the National Association of Gifted and Talented Youth. And so it was this real kind of magnetic polar opposite of, you'll do nothing, but you're also really smart. So I always felt like I lived within this world of, how do I exist? Because what am I? How do I behave? I always feel different. I always feel a bit strange. And then as I got into the working world, it's really easy to mask behaviour in the working world. And especially when you work with people and you're working in leadership roles, it's very easy, because your job is there to serve other people. And therefore you can kind of, in certain regards, forget yourself, because you're there to exist for other people. And I know that's kind of the opposite of what we were saying earlier, but then I think the flip side of that is, the more I started to understand about my own brain and putting myself first, that in that regard, selfish isn't a bad thing. Understanding how I work allows me to show up as a more whole person in the workplace. And that doesn't mean that you need to show people every part of you. You really don't. But the more we trust ourselves, the easier I think it is for us to interact in the work world. So going back to the question around ADHD, during lockdown, I spent a lot of time on Instagram and TikTok, as many people did back in those days. And a lot more content was coming up about ADHD and things like, I find it really difficult to sit still. So if you're watching this today, you'll see that I'm fidgeting quite a lot, or, touching my ring, or whatever, it doesn't really matter. I find it really difficult to do certain things, sitting still. I find travelling really difficult, which I think is quite, again, an oxymoron, because I spend a lot of my life travelling, and it's because I've managed to put coping mechanisms in place so that I understand how those transitions work for me. within the working world, I used to work 70, 80-hour weeks. I used to just constantly throw myself into work and then go out after work, and that was very normalised. And it kind of allowed me to forget who I was. I didn't really know it at that time in my 20s. But during lockdown, I had to face a lot of stuff because I was living in a shared flat where the housemates weren't really there. And so all of this social stimulation and work stimulation that I had was in a 13-inch screen that I closed at the end of the day. And I'd sit in my room and think, what's going on? It's so quiet. I don't really know what to do. And I feel like I'm going a bit off topic here, but from an ADHD point of view, for me, it's not necessarily about the terminology of ADHD. It gave me a set of tools to start working with to go, oh, actually, maybe I do need to go for a walk. Maybe I do need to get out of the house. Maybe I need to start eating a bit cleaner because I spent my life eating fast food, drinking 5 pints in a day, which I'm not really built to drink 5 pints, alcohol in it. For me, I don't drink alcohol that much anymore because I know how it affects me. Things like a back-to-back calendar I find really, really difficult. So if I'm in calls from 9 till 5 with maybe a 30-minute break, my mind is mush. And to understand those things about myself enabled me to then go, oh, I don't want to do most of those things. But if I do, it means that I need to take time in other places. And it kind of allowed me to not necessarily pick and mix, but it allowed me to make decisions on if I'm going to do that today, like doing this podcast, it will mean that I'll want to sit at home for a little bit this evening and just chill. Because I've had a lot of social interaction. Whilst this is really interesting and it's super cool and I'm loving it, I'm having the best time, it also requires me afterwards to have a bit of downtime. I don't know if that answered your question. I think I got overexcited, which is another part of my brain. And also, I think that's another thing of understanding what makes me tick. I love talking to people. I love understanding how other people work and how to make things better for people. So when Darren said, do you want to come on this podcast? I thought, absolutely, that is my jam. And that's one of the things that I think I'm quite good at, is saying yes to things that I think will make a difference.
That's great.
And could you talk us through that understanding journey? So, you talked about a few things there, going for a walk, that kind of back-to-back meetings, alcohol, for example. Talk us through how you got that understanding and that awareness.
I think going back to one of those things that we were talking about earlier is experience and trial and error. Going back to what we were saying earlier about training dogs or working with children, we're just big children in suits. We really are. And we get a bit older and we've got a few more skills, but I still think that we're adults with, is it Fisher-Price? A Fisher-Price toolkit. That is the toolkit that we've had since we were 5. And if we don't try and find other ways of working, we will always have that toolkit that we built when we were 5 years old, which means how we regulate our own emotions, how we mirror back to people how we want us and them to behave. It comes from a really different place to where we are now. And the more aware I was becoming of myself, because I was on my own with my own thoughts quite a lot, to be really honest, I was able to go, oh, maybe that's why I do that. Interesting.
And I think that's something that everyone can take, because actually this isn't so much for just people who have ADHD or know people with it. Actually, everyone can look at their lives and go, what aspects of it do I love? What don't I? But also, why? What am I doing just before I go into that meeting that makes the outcome of that meeting not very good? Because actually, again, it goes back to that control your controllables. And what can I do to change things? Don't blame the stuff around you. Don't blame the situation you're in. Don't feel that self-pity at times. You're going, this is what I am, and this is how I can move forward, to take full responsibility to move forward.
Can I just take you back a few minutes? You mentioned about your coping mechanisms for travel. Mm-hmm. Would you mind sharing some of those? Because I think there's something I've come across before in terms of ADHD that people often struggle with the travel side of things. So it'd be great if you could share that may just help a few people that are listening.
Sure, I think transition can be really challenging for lots of people as well, actually. I personally find transition really difficult. So any kind of change, my brain, especially if I've thought something was going to be the same for a while and then it changes, I think, how am I going to get through this? And again, I've said walking quite a lot. Walking is really, really helpful for me because it connects the mind and the body back together. Because when you're walking, you have to think about where you're going, and so you can't really think about anything else. But going back to the travel thing, so I like writing lists and I like being really prepared. And it's a strategy and a coping mechanism that I've created around myself because I have no concept of time. I have no idea sometimes how I get to meetings, and it's because I've got those structures in place to kind of take away from my brain what I'm supposed to be thinking about. So my journey here today, I came from Devon. I got up at 7:15 because my alarm went off. So I've set an alarm, and I set the alarm the same time every day. So again, I don't have to think about doing that thing. It's one time. So 5 days a week, my alarm goes off at 7:15. I've packed my bag beforehand. So I try and think about how kind can I be to future Gina? Because if I'd have come here we're meant to start this at 1. Again, I don't know what time it is. This is supposed to start at 1. I get here at maybe 1:15. I know that I'm late. I'm really flustered. It's the middle of summer, so it's super hot. And to come into that is the opposite of a gift for me. And I know that things change, by the way. If the trains were late or something had happened, I've given myself enough of a chance to be able to get to this space as calmly as possible, because naturally I'm quite chaotic, and I try and make parts of my life as calm as possible to allow the chaos to be a bit more interesting rather than overwhelming. So anything that you can do to make your brain not think. For example, setting an alarm all the time. I speak to a friend when I've got to sort out travel arrangements. So after this, I'm going to London and then I'm doing a whole bunch of other stuff. It's all in a calendar. So I live by my calendar, and that is a very good tool for me to be able to say, oh, this is what I'm doing at this time. Okay. Going back to what you were saying earlier, Darren, of what you can do and what do you do in meetings or beforehand. Before a meeting, I like to have a few minutes to myself so I can prepare for something, whether it's a conversation or just have a bit of a rest. So give yourself those moments. You can be a couple minutes late for a meeting, but taking it back to travel, I plan it to give myself enough time. And I think there's a common, I don't know whether the word is misconception, that ADHDers can't plan for time, and I don't necessarily think that's true. I know it's really difficult, it's really challenging, but again, going back to that taking control of what you can control. I can't control whether the trains are going to be late, but what I can control is that I can get a train an hour or so earlier, and I've taken a whole day to do this. So, and I know that's not always possible, by the way, and it's a very privileged position to be in, to be able to say I can take a day to do something. I've given that gift to myself so that I can take that time, so I can be in this space and be a calmer version of myself, because for me it's quite nice to feel chilled and relaxed and have a conversation rather than being that on edge, because you can see it and you can feel it.
I think that's just such good advice. Generally speaking, that is great advice. And I love the bit where you say, be kind to future self. I think that's a really good mantra, really good philosophy to have. And, you know, we talk about it with the training team. I talk about it when we're delivering to or coaching executives down to, you know, sort of first line managers. Take away all the noise, anything that is going to add to your stress levels, your anxiety around doing something. Get rid of it. And what I mean by get rid of it is set your alarm. And if you need to travel a little bit earlier, get the early train. Set your alarm a little bit earlier. Pack your bag the night before, because then you're not worrying about these things.
Because they all need to happen. And again, going back to that breaking things down, where future me is a really good beacon of kind of, I don't know, if I've got coffee cups in the sink, future me's going to have to clean that up in the morning. So if I can give that gift to myself in the morning, you think, and it also gives you that little bit of joy. It really does give me a bit of joy when I go, I don't have to clean that up because I've done it.
You get dopamine hit.
Absolutely.
Because you've achieved something.
I spend my life chasing dopamine, absolutely spend my life doing it. And I'm learning that I would rather chase the dopamine that's good for me rather than staying out all night because I'm trying to, I don't know, have really interesting conversations and I've drank 5 pints and I think, oh no. And then the dopamine, whilst I might get a lot of dopamine in that situation, the next day or 3 days are really overwhelming and I find it really difficult. Now I'm chasing dopamine of cleaning coffee cups and getting on early trains.
So the military do that in terms of the first thing you do when you get out of bed is make your bed because you're off to a good start within the day. And the other one, Johnny Wilkinson, who's the great English rugby player, fly half, won the World Cup. He really struggled coming out of that elite environment where he'd won the World Cup, which is the ultimate. It is the biggest thing he could achieve in his career. To 10 years later, retired rugby player, not sure what to do. And I listened to him on a podcast, I think it was a high performance podcast. And he was talking about he found satisfaction and achievement in those small things. So I'm sure he used the same example of doing the washing up. So his thing as a rugby player was always, I've got to be the best. I've got to absolutely be the best player I can be, but I need to be better than anyone else in the world. He took that into when he's washing up. He is the best at washing up in that moment. And that it gave him, to a certain extent, the same hit of dopamine, that same sense of achievement. And I think that's really important to find those things. And I'm going to come back to the point you made about be kind to your future self. Do it in the moment. There's some good rules. If you look at Atomic Habits, if it takes less than 2 minutes, do it now. Just get it done. Because that's setting yourself up to succeed further down the line. And if that's a reward of, hey, I've washed up in the evening, I'll get 5 minutes extra in bed, or actually I get out of bed and I don't have to spend 5 minutes washing up. I've got 5 minutes I can spend reading, do a bit of personal